So my number three is Meet Me in St. Louis, directed by Vincent Minnelli, starring Judy Garland, Margaret O'Brien, Mary Astor from 1944. Quick log line on this: young love and childish fears highlight a year in the life of a turn of the century family. So I put this movie on my list because to me, this movie kind of represents the warmth of family just hanging out and being together. I really associate that with my growing up, that sure we were doing, adventures and activities, and frankly, moving to a different city every few years was an adventure in itself. But I think what I remember the most and what I think of the most when I think of family and home is just the four of us, and often just my mom and my sister and I, if my dad was out at work, hanging out, cooking, playing board games, running around the house, watching movies, listening to music for hours and hours, and kind of dancing around the whole house. So I feel like this movie really captures that sense of warmth in the mundane. And of course, it's all heightened because it's a holiday time, and the big fair is coming in this time period as well, so things are heightened, but I think the essence of that feeling really comes through. So that's one big reason why this is on my list. The other big reason is, I talked about moving. That's the big theme of this movie, right?
Yeah.
That is sort of the antagonist of the movie, that what's going to happen if this family has to leave St. Louis and move somewhere else. And that also is something, as I said before, I relate to a lot. Of course, we did that all the time, and not unlike this family. So I think the movie does a really good job in capturing the anger and the sadness, but yet some excitement as well, of what this move could be. In my case, it wasn't so much the anger or sadness. I think we were always excited because frankly, that's all we knew, In fact, if
right.
we were not moving in like 2.5, 3 years, something felt odd. But I do still relate with this sort of inevitability that's going to happen, if you are going to move. And the lead up to that is kind of an interesting, challenging thing to deal with. So I love that about this movie. That's the only plot in the movie.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
there are other things that are happening, but this is the main thing.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is, it's obviously a movie set in a different time period. So allegiances to sort of quote unquote typical family structure of kind of the man of the house being the head of the household, and all of that is very much in place. But I do think every character in the movie has a voice to express how they feel, and everybody is quite disheveled and not happy with this whole news. And of course, ultimately the father comes around, but the whole thing is handled with just so much of love, which is the other thing that I really relate to from my family, where, my dad definitely was and still is the head of the household, but it was never like that we didn't have a voice. We all did have a voice, and ultimately all big decisions in my household were made jointly. We all came to it. There was discussion. Maybe there was some angry words that were exchanged, what have you, but there was an open discussion with emotions, all of it. And then we finally came to a decision that we all felt okay with. And not so much about the moving or not moving, because that was going to happen regardless because of my dad's profession, but other things, the big decisions of life, or even the small decisions of life. Are you going to go out for this party and stay up till so and so hour? It was a family decision. So I think that's another thing that I really love about this movie. And I don't know, it felt very relatable, and felt like I have seen this world, in some form. So yeah, that's why this movie is special. The movie in itself, like, Vincent Minnelli is just a master of color. Like, this movie is just so luxurious and beautiful, head to toe. So that, stating the obvious. Another stating the obvious, Judy Garland. I think this is one of my favorite performances of her. I haven't seen all of her work, but I think she has this sense of assuredness and confidence while being innocent in this movie. Often the roles that she's played, she's very innocent. That's sort of how I always think of her in the movies, until of course Star is Born, which is a very different kind of performance. But this is one of her sort of, I'm not a child, I'm a young woman sort of performance, which I really love. And then of course, the moment she opens her mouth to
Oh
saying
yeah.
like no one can match her, if I'm not mistaken, this might be my intro to her. I hadn't really
Hmm.
watched much of her stuff until I watched this movie, which was maybe about, I want to say 6, 7 years ago. So it's still
Oh.
fairly new. I didn't grow up with this movie. This was not a holiday movie in my house. So it's fairly new, but it's sort of, made an impact and it stayed with me since. So, but yeah, this was a great intro for me to her. And then of
Hmm.
course I got curious and saw a lot of her other stuff as well. It's a great comfort picture. It's a great holiday movie as well. Like I said, not much happens if you just want to listen to a few songs. Just look at the beautiful colors and this beautiful house. You can just watch 20 minutes of it and be done with it, and
Hmm.
it'll bring a lot of joy to you, which frankly is how I look at family as well. A quick phone call, a quick something can sort of feel like this balm to
Hmm.
whatever you might be going through in that day. So yeah, that's my number three.
Yeah, I've never heard this movie described as a hangout movie, but it actually totally is. That's like a great way to describe this because yeah, their plot isn't nothing much really happens. It's just like a family kind of chilling in turn of the century St. Louis and
Yeah.
singing some nice songs. And so yeah, I also really enjoy this film. I'd watch this a lot as a kid. It's one of my
Mm,
grandmother's, on my mom's favorite movies. So I kind of
mm,
associate it with her because I watch it a lot when I go over and see her. And so I can't remember the first time I saw it, but it was always something a movie that I enjoyed. It's just the that feeling of family that comes across in this film is very comforting. So it's just nice
mhm.
kind of to put it on. Great songs, the trolley song's a classic, and obviously Have Yourself a Merry Christmas. Like
Oh,
those are
yeah.
great songs, and Garland does a fantastic job in them. It is interesting too, like with the because I was looking at this time I watched it around. It's a lot about like the family roles, and it is definitely one of those like very traditional am I not the head of this household scene where like the
Right.
dad has to say that. He has a lot of daughters that typically in these types of movies too, like Sound of Music or
Yeah.
Mary Poppins, two films we've talked about in past episodes. It's that same sort of like, am I not the dad? Am I not in control? Even though, yeah, they're not really in control because they capitulate to everyone else in the family because it is like at the end of the day, it is group decisions that happen, even though the fathers in these situations like to think that they're in charge, but really they're not actually in charge. Like they do what their kids want at the end of the day, which I thought was always kind of fun. It was interesting too, just seeing this with like the kids in the film too. Like, what is her name? Trudy, right? Was
Yeah.
she yeah? Who I think was like Oscar, like one of those when they had the kid Oscars, they gave her like one
Right.
of the kid Oscars. But that scene at Halloween where like the kids are like, yeah, let's just burn stuff and like punch people in the face and throws things at stuff and throw like a fake body in front of the tracks just to see what happened. Like, man, like kids back then, I mean, you think kids now are bad. These are like bad kids. It was like, what? I'm like, come on, where are your parents? Like, what? You're literally starting bonfires in the middle of the street. I just thought that was kind of funny and like kind of cute and sort of how innocent things were back then. Where, yeah, you could like Halloween was just about like throwing sand in someone's face, and that's like a fun thing to do. It's like I don't think
Goodness.
anyone ever these days would get away with that.
No.
Um,
That segment
Funny.
is the oddest like segment in the whole movie.
Yeah.
It almost doesn't belong in the movie. But
It's just like a slice of
yeah,
life, I guess. Back
I
then, like that's
guess
just what
maybe this
kids
is how it
did.
was.
Yeah, there were no phones. So, hey, if there are no phones, might as well cause like a major traffic accident. So maybe thank God for phones. But yeah, I mean, the movie, everything you said, like I definitely second. It's a great film, classic Technicolor musical, like one of the best musicals. Even though, again, it really isn't much of a plot.
Yeah,
It's just, oh, do we move to New York? Oh, we're not going to go to New York. End of plot. But like that's fine. It's a chill
that's
hangout
fine.
movie. I love that. Just I'll now think of this movie always as a hangout movie in the future. I love that description. So yeah, it's fun rewatch. I definitely, if folks haven't seen it, highly recommend. Meet Me in St. Louis, especially around this time of year. I think you're
Yeah.
right. It's a good holiday movie, good, get together with the family and throw this thing on. So glad I watched it again
Yeah.
for this.
Good.
Great
Yeah.
film. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.